Namaste. I would like to talk to you about the total solar eclipse of the 18th August 1868 and the aftermath of that here in India. The total solar eclipse is historically important for several reasons. It's called the eclipse of the King of Siam. Uh, the path of totality, as you see here, passed through several countries from Yemen to Indonesia, and several teams observed it very efficiently, and it led to the discovery of helium. There are special articles in the journal JAHH in the year 2021. Please take a look at it. And this is the photograph of the King Rama entertaining his French and British astronomers who participated in the eclipse camp. And that is why this is known as the eclipse of the King of Siam. He himself predicted the eclipse, timings of the eclipse. The basic principle that is employed in the Indian text is to calculate the positions of the sun and the moon and the node, the ascending node and the descending node. Here, the nodes are given the status of planets, not both the nodes. One is sufficient because the other is 180 degrees away from it. It has a periodicity of 18 years and 11 days, and it is always moving in retrograde suns. Once the positions of the nodes are calculated, they continue to get the point of conjunction. And in case the conjunction, that is the new moon or full moon, is closer to the point of the node, there is a possibility of eclipse. So that is calculated. And after that, they calculate where is this is the position they have calculated, and based on that, they calculate where the duration of the eclipse, etc. For that, they have to calculate the at the instant of eclipse, what are the instantaneous speeds and what are the instantaneous values of the diameters of the sun, the moon, and the shadow. In the context of 1868 eclipse also is important. By then, the British had sort of settled in India, although the telescopes were introduced in the 17th century. They were able to establish telescope facilities much later. This is the famous Madras Observatory established in 1796. This is another one in 1827, established by Maharaja Swati Tirunal in South India. Both are in South India. At the same time, the British scholars tried to understand the procedures adopted by the traditional scholars for the calculation of eclipses and other things. The foremost I can mention is Leigh Gentile, who came in 18th century for observing the transit of Venus, but he transferred his knowledge to all Europeans. There is an interesting debate which involves the astronomical computations of the Western and traditional Indian scholars. It has something to do with the Reverend Daniel Poor, who attempted to understand the finer details of the computations. So the lunar eclipse of 20th March of 1829 provided him an opportunity, and in the debate that ensued and verified in front of the public in an open place, he found that there is a discrepancy. He estimated it to be 9 minutes after sunset, whereas the traditional scholars had it as 24 minutes after sunset. There was a discrepancy. He was right. He proved his point again for another eclipse of 3rd September 1830. So this resulted in heated arguments, and many other traditional astronomers were not convinced that there was an error. And there were many monographs written openly accusing the British of trying to plagiarize or trying to uh, put up a show. So the title of this paper by Venkateshwaran gives all the details. He has given the title of the paper as Star Wars, but there was not a war in the real sense. It turned out to be a mutually beneficial platform, so there was a lot of exchange of ideas and knowledge. See Raghnathachari, his name becomes important in this context. He was well versed with the traditional method of calculations, and he was employed in the Madras Observatory, had learned the skills of using a telescope, micrometer measurements, and so on. He discovered a variable star and he was a member of the Royal Astronomical Society also. He had his own telescope at his house. He prepared the details of the timings and magnitude of the 1868 eclipse for various towns in India and urged people to get convinced of the accuracy and the need for corrections based on observations. These observations were carried out at various places in India. Four teams from the Madras Observatory, plus there were a French team, Italian team, and so on. They all carried out along the path of totality. And there was one in Siam also, which I mentioned already. And all these details may be found in this paper. The results were very interesting, and the Norman Pogson, who was the director of the Madras Observatory, prepared these hand-drawn sketches for the two yellow lines of sodium here, and this is the corona as viewed by him. Further, there was another opportunity for Raghnathachari to convince the local people to continue with the calculations based on the corrections obtained from the previous eclipses. In 1871, there was an eclipse. There again, he prepared a monograph, explained the procedure. This is the map he has prepared for the path of totality in India, and for all these numbers. For every town, he calculated the timings of the eclipse, and the English version is a very simple report, but the Kannada version and perhaps the Tamil version and Telugu version, he was well versed in many languages, regional languages. In all these things, he was able to convince the local astronomers to take up the observation quite seriously, and their computations also he had compiled and asked them to verify on the day of the eclipse whether their was correct or his was correct. So this is the map of the sky that he has provided at the time of the eclipse, and interestingly, he provides the position of a comet also, and understanding the motion of the comet was somewhat unusual for the local traditional astronomers. Following this, there are three manuscripts which are available, which speaks of the kind of a conflict the traditional astronomers had. This one called Kachara Darpana, the first one, which is this book, and gives the calculation of the eclipses in a very great detail for the eclipses. But however, there is always a mismatch, which is very obvious. But the author is trying to come down heavily on the European methods and says that our method is the correct one, and even measurement of time, etc., there may be discrepancy. On the other hand, some people who had seen that the Western methods were yielding more accurate results, they got this book. For example, the Maharaja of Mysore, the King of Mysore, got this book written by Chadurangaraja Aras. This is called Grahana Darpana. And every eclipse from 1867 to 1900, they have been catalogued, and for every one of them, the drawing like this has been provided. This is to be understood in the context of midpoint of the eclipse. And for the 1868 eclipse, this is the drawing, and it adds saying that this is only very slightly short of totality. That's what it says. The other book, Grahaganita Bhaskara, has the computations for all celestial events like eclipses and planetary conjunctions for the year 1847, and just for that a book has been written. So here also we notice that if you make some corrections on the initial parameters, it appears to be fairly well understood. The effect of the 1871 eclipse was really very good. 1868 and 1871, two solar eclipses at a very short notice. Raghnathachari prepared yet another one for the transit of Venus in 1874, wherein he pleaded the traditional scholars to apply the necessary corrections after looking up at the sky. And he had provided them the time units in terms of the shadow length of a 12-inch gnomon, which was the tradition followed by the Indian astronomers. He had also given a timing for the occultation of Venus, which happened at daytime, asking them to look for this event. The event was taken quite seriously, and there were many observations reported. He wanted to bridge a cordial relation between the traditional scholars and the European astronomers so that an error-free almanac for Indians could be prepared. But he passed away before that. But in 1898, when there was another total solar eclipse, people were more curious and more observations were reported. And this is a photograph of the king, Maharaja of Mysore, visiting an eclipse camp. We were fortunate to have Bapu Venkatesha Ketkar, who was well versed with both the European methods and the traditional Indian methods, and who was able to nail down the point where the corrections are needed for the Indian calculations. And he prepared this chronology order, and he prepared the tables for the local astronomers who could use it directly and apply the corrections. His system was very popular in South India at least, and his method was itself was known as Ketaki Grahaganitam. Interestingly, he also had predicted the position of Pluto 29 years before it was discovered. And he offered two options, are both are present, and this is the handwritten calculation, and this is the small table he published in a French journal. And look at the comparison with Lowell and Pickering. You notice that his calculations yield values which are closer to what is the observed with the respective Pluto. So today we have Ketaki Ganitam and the Indian astronomical ephemeris being calculated very precisely, and a typical calendar like this. This is a typical calendar used in our all household, and these columns convey a lot of astronomical details, as I have explained here. So, other than the weekday, there is the solar month, lunar month, serial number of the star, which is this moon is going around the thing in 27 days. And then, interestingly, we have a thing called Male Nakshatra, which is the rain star, which actually tells you the position of the sun within 13 degrees. So, all these details we are able to now compute very correctly, and the Indian traditional calendars are still in operation in every household. Namaste. Thank you.